In this video, we're going to look at some select questions from Lesson 19, which is on analyzing double bar graphs. Remember that double bar graphs are used to compare two sets of data. So we're going to look at some double bar graphs and try to interpret them to see what the graphs are telling us about the data. Let's begin on page 112 in your math journal. And on page 112, we have a double bar graph here that is going to be used to answer questions 10 through 14. One thing you may notice right away is that this double bar graph is missing some important information. And the most important information it's missing is a title. There is no title up here, so we don't know for sure what this double bar graph is even showing us. We can probably look at it and make some inferences, but it's hard for us to know exactly what this double bar graph is actually showing. The second thing it's missing down here is it's missing labels along the x-axis and along the y-axis. Now along the y-axis we can probably guess what those are. It looks like they are maybe after-school activities, but we don't know for sure if they're after-school activities or maybe they're weekend activities. Again, if there was a title, it would have helped us understand that, and if there was a label over here, it would have helped us understand that. Down here, we don't know if these numbers down here are minutes or even hours. Maybe these could be hours an entire year. Maybe they could be hours per week, or hours, I guess hours per week would be an awful lot, because 120 hours per week on something would be a lot, but maybe hours per month even. So we really need to know if maybe this graph is showing minutes spent per day on various different activities, but without a title we can't for sure know that. Now there are some clues in the questions when we get farther down. For example, question 13 does refer to it as minutes, but again, without a title and without some labels on here, we can't be sure. So let's jump in and start doing our best to answer these questions. It says number 10, how much time does Laura spend doing homework? Laura is the blue graph, so doing homework is right here. She spends 100 minutes. Number 11, who spends more time playing video games? Here's video games, and it's definitely the red one, which is Max. Question 12 says, who spends more time at piano lessons? Here's piano lessons. Notice that there is only a blue bar. There is not a red bar. That tells you that Max's number would be 0. Which we can assume that then Max must not take piano lessons, so therefore Laura spends more time at piano lessons. On which activity does Laura spend 40 minutes more than Max? So we're looking at only the graphs where Laura is more than Max, so this one's out. And let's see, this one's out. The other ones that she spends more than Max, and we're counting by tens here. This is 10 right here, this distance. So that would be 10, 20, and it looks like that would be half, so that would be 25. So that's 25 more. This one right here would be 10, 20, 30, 40 more. Okay, so we found it, and this one is 10, 20, 30 more. So it's definitely homework. And question 14 says, who do you think has more free time, and explain? Well, part of that depends on your definition of free time. But if you're considering free time to be leisure type activities that you can do when you don't have something else that you have to do. So we could think of things like chores is an activity that you have to do, homework is an activity that you have to do, and maybe even piano lessons is an activity that you have to do, especially if your parents are paying for it. So playing video games and watching TVs are leisure type activities that you can do at any time. So I would call those free time activities, and the person who spends way more time on those leisure type activities is Max on both of them. And a matter of fact, if you went through and you counted up all the minutes that each person spends total on this graph, the actual total number of minutes is identical for Laura and Max on everything. So if you add up all the blue numbers and then add up all the red numbers, they actually equal the same amount of minutes. So again, without a title, we're not sure, but maybe this graph is trying to show us how two different students spent their afternoons on a particular day, what they spent those afternoon minutes doing. Let's now look at question 15. It says the graph shows the number of students who walk or ride to school. Describe a possible trend to explain the data. So this bar graph is showing ways that students get to school. And we have red is walk and blue is ride a car or ride a bus. And then we have the number of students along the y-axis and the areas where students live along the x-axis. Urban means students who live in a city. Suburban would mean students who live in a smaller city that is close to a large city. A suburb is a small city that's just on the outside of a large city. And rural means out in the country, far away from any large cities. So it appears that in urban areas, there's a significant amount of students who walk compared to ride a car or take the bus. Whereas in the suburbs, it's actually fairly close, but ride a car or take a bus gets higher. And then in rural areas, pretty much, well, according to this data, everybody rides a car or takes a bus. Nobody walks to school. So as far as the trend that is in the graph, it appears that as you get farther away from the city, that you're more likely to ride a car or take a bus to school, because students that are living in a city, not very many of them do that. But as we get farther away from the city, this would be on the outskirts of a city, more people are riding a car or taking a bus. And when you get way away from a city, everybody is riding a car or taking a bus. So the trend in this graph would be the farther away you get from the city, the more likely you are to ride a car or take a bus to get to school.